It's working. Thank
Mayor, can you hear me if I speak?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, that's much better. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, well, welcome. Today is Tuesday, June 21st, 2022, and this is the work session for the Cottonwood Heights Community Development and Renewal Agency, as we'll soon refer to as the CDRA. As Mayor, I'm the chairman for this agency, and our first item of discussion this evening is a presentation on the Canyon Center. And I'm going to turn the time over to Mike Johnson, our Community Economic Development Director, to get us started with this. Hi, Chris.
Thank you. I'm just getting presentation pulled up and then we'll get into it. And for this first item, I'm going to give an overview just to kind of tee it up for the agency and then turn some time over to Chris McCandless, who has initiated this request for your consideration. So we've been approached by Chris McCandless, who is the developer and owner of CW Management, who developed the Canyon Center project in Cottonwood Heights up at the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon. As a quick overview of this project, I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. It was originally created as a CDA, a Community Development Area project back in 2011. It's the only active community development area or project that utilizes tax increment financing in Cottonwood Heights. It's an 11-acre mixed-use redevelopment project. A big portion of the public investment on this was the construction of a large public parking structure that sits underneath 3 of the buildings there. And then there's a public park as well that the city will get out of this at the end. A majority of that project is complete or under construction right now and substantially complete. The exceptions to that are an apartment building that will front on Racket Club Drive that's not submitted for permit yet, a public park that will be owned. It'll be a city park in the middle of the site, and then an office building, and that's what we're talking about tonight. Just as an FYI, and there's another slide later for the next item where we'll talk about this a little bit, but the trigger for tax increment payments has formally triggered as of 2021. So we are now starting I believe the 25-year clock on the collection of tax increment financing revenues and then distributing that to each taxing entity based on those agreements. Just as a quick overview, here's a site plan, the master site plan for the project. And I'll just point your attention to the office building. It's located on the southern end of that parking garage. It's obviously not constructed today, but that's what we're talking about tonight. You can see the hotel there and restaurant and retail and everything else except for that in the apartment building has been built. The proposal that is up for feedback and questions from the agency tonight is a proposed modification to the entitled but unconstructed office building. This received its conditional use entitlement, I believe, in 2013 as part of phase 1, along with the parking structure and a few other portions of that project. And it's included in the city's approvals, both from a planning and zoning conditional use standpoint, but also from the CDRA standpoint and the interlocal agreements with all the taxing entities. It was presented and approved as 100% office type use, so professional office. The proposed amendment that Mr. McCandless will discuss with you tonight is to mix that building with office and for purchase condominiums. So 55% office, 45% for purchase residential condominiums above the office. So I'll let Chris detail that a little more, but just from a regulatory perspective, if the agency supports exploring this or going into this further, this is generally the process we would have to follow to get there. One would be a conditional use amendment that would go just through the planning commission, but to amend the use itself, because right now it's only entitled for office. That would require a public hearing at the planning commission. And then the other one, which is a big one, based on the analysis by Tim and I and a lot of input by Shane, would be renegotiation and amendment of the interlocal agreements that have been signed with all of the taxing entities, which are listed here. And that's where formal approval by the city would come from. That doesn't come tonight. But it would come through this negotiation process. And we don't know yet what the feedback would be from the other taxing entities before we get direction from the agency here. The amended use proposed may impact also the generated revenues for each taxing entity based on the taxable value of a 100% office use versus a use that's part office and part condominiums. So that's an impact we'd want to explore further as if we explore this. Are there any questions for staff? If there's not, I'll just turn it over to Chris for a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm ready to go to Chris
Okay.
unless somebody has a comment.
May I just add, so really tonight, and Chris will present, and really what we're seeking, as Mike has said, is direction from the council. If there is major concerns with modifying this, then that's the direction that we would like to hear. If there's a comfort level to at least move through this process for future consideration, that's the other aspect that we'd like your input on, and Chris will definitely explain the project, but that's what we need tonight. So like Mike said, no decision, but some direction on whether you want us to pursue an amendment to the development agreement, because that's the CDRA board's prerogative, whether they want to do an amendment or not on this, and that's what we'll seek tonight.
I have two quick questions,
Sure.
if I may. One is, I'm not sure what phase the building portion is considered, but does CW management have any kind of timeline related to completion and building for that Office 1 area?
I think I'll let Chris answer that. And I think that's
I'm
probably why
asking for
he's
if
here.
the city imposed any kind of building timelines or if
I
that
don't
was ever
believe-
established.
No, I don't think there's a construction timeline in the agreements, other than we are actively collecting tax increment, and the longer there's not a building there, the less increment we collect.
I think that there is a
Oh, is there?
construction
Okay.
timeline in the development agreement.
The other question is, with the way the parking structure has been built out, it's quite different than the diagram that we're looking at now related to the park area. So I know that isn't really on the docket to discuss tonight, but I would be very interested to understand what the city has planned in terms of building out that park. Will it include the amphitheater? And, I'd like to get more on that as soon as possible.
Yeah, so the parcel, the acreage of the park has never changed throughout this. It's a 1 acre parcel that we will retain. There's been no design yet because there's been no funding collected to pay for that design, but now we have started collecting increments. So, I think design work could begin, but what's shown here is not any sort of committed design or approved at all. That'll be a future process.
So the proportionality remains 1 acre.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's unchanged.
Thank you.
And if I may add, that will be our responsibility once we collect enough increment over time to start design and development of the park, but it is going to take some time because that money is just coming in yearly and we would need a substantial amount to build the park.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Chris, come on up.
Can I plug this in? Just want to join the meeting. There's nothing to plug into. It's all routed to email. How do I get my presentation? Send me an email. Send it to me. Yep.
Hi, everybody. When I gotta do something I don't know how to do. One of those guys that,
Chris, could you pull the microphone closer?
How's that
I'm
better?
having a little, that's
bet.
much better. Thank you.
So I'm one of those guys that never really understood how to work computers. So I'm gonna try and email this information to Michael. Bear with me for just a couple seconds. You don't get to see a picture of this bear I took and her cub walking around though. Pretty cool picture. Johnson. Should have done this earlier, huh? Oh, no, I'm not connected. Love it when things go wrong. CWC guest?
Ma-
Or
Matt,
CWH?
can you help?
Okay.
Well, as far as getting
Says I'm
connected to Wi-Fi
connected.
to email. Okay.
Well, it's
While
not
we're doing
coming.
that, one thing that I could probably add to the discussion, so I actually, as Chris came and gave us indication of what he would maybe look like to do with this property, I reached out to affected residents, specifically along Rock Club Drive, and those that were really concerned about this project. And all 100% reacted positively. That this would be a positive thing. We actually got a Canyon Center HOA email sent to us, and they are in full support of what changes that Chris made.
Says enter the network security key.
Yeah, you can't get on that one.
Oh, okay, then I won't try.
You sure one now showing up as Mike?
Well, let's go back and look at it, shall we? Got laptops, I got no mic. I've got an iPhone. Mike, are you on an iPhone and doing a hotspot? Thank you. I could use mine if I understand how to do it. Come on. It says it's secured, doesn't want to let me in. Okay. In the meantime, I'll talk a little bit while we're trying to figure that out, and I can just talk through this. Got some really nice pictures though for you guys to look at, and a nice presentation, and I'll give you a copy of everything I'm talking about. Where are we at? Canyon Center. So presently there's two little retail facilities. One's underneath the hotel and one's right next to 8 Settlers, if you're familiar with that. So the one that's underneath the hotel is kind of a multi-purpose facility. The guys that own Rooted are leased, and we're currently doing improvements for those guys. And they're gonna have a, not a spa, but a workout room. Most likely it's gonna be either cycling or something like that. They're gonna take coffee and small food sources up there. They're not gonna hook, I don't believe they're gonna hook up to the grease trap, so they're not gonna have a kitchen. It'll be a reduced version of Rooted, the restaurant they own on 27, which I like a lot. Have at it. The second place that's right next to it, we're pretty excited about it. We signed an LOI and we're down a day away from signing the lease. It's a group called The Break. They have a place in South Jordan that's extraordinary. It's a nice sports bar restaurant. We think it'll be a great complement to 8 Settlers, and they should be in there probably within the next 4 months, which is pretty exciting. It'd be nice to have those things done. It's been a long project for us. The project in and of itself, and Councilwoman Burrell, you're right, that's an old master plan. And I've got a picture of the updated version on my presentation, and I'll give you guys copies of that if we can't get this to it. Some of the changes that were made were refinements to primarily the site plan, but the park stayed exactly the same. And so it increased some of the parking stalls associated with this project. The actual cost was in the $30,000 per stall, $30,000+ per stall bracket. To replace them today would probably be $37,000 per stall, mostly concrete and steel. That stuff's in short supply. So one of the concepts that we had was, it's been a long haul for us. This is the longest it's ever taken us to put together a project and complete it. COVID, the economy, a variety of things. We had the building sold and under contract to a gentleman who couldn't perform. And it took us about 3 years to get the property back from him, so we could then move it forward. We've come in as the bridesmaid on office space. I don't know how many times. We've got to the altar and then they went away. And it's not like they went someplace else. They just decided not to do anything because of the marketplace. COVID's made a significant difference and it's hurt the office buildings. One of the ideas that we had was to convert it into all residential. And as we read through Shane's work, we worked pretty closely together on there. And it says in the development agreement that a majority of the space has to be used for office. And so we said, well, we did come in a year or so ago and talk about 3 levels of residential condominiums. I just don't want to fight, right? I'd rather just figure out what's going to work for everybody and do that. And so we think that 2 levels of residential condominiums is probably going to work the best. I have, and I'll distribute it a little later. Is it working yet? Okay, here we go. All right. I'm not. All right, good. 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 Okay, let me know when you got it up. So we talked about that. We said, so what's the differences between an all office building structure and an office building / mixed use residential condominium? We've been talking with the neighbors. I don't know if you guys have talked to any of them. I know the mayor has. And I think they sent you a letter endorsing us, which just shocked me. I thought that was kind of cool. And the idea is, or the differences that we'll show in the exhibits, is that for an office building, it has a floor to floor ceiling height of 15 feet. 4 floors, I'm going to be up in the air quite a way. For residential construction, you're floor to floor at 12. So I build a shorter building, which I think is a nice element. The building actually would be about the same height as the hotel. And I've got a picture that shows the differences between those 2 renderings. The second part is that residential parking is considerably lower than office buildings. By the development agreement, I am mandated that I cannot exceed 4.5 stalls per 1,000 in my leases. And quite frankly, with the number of stalls right now, I can't hit 4. And so we're a little hamstrung with the parking that we've got based upon the number of, and back when we did this agreement, that was marketable. Now everybody wants more parking. And so we're struggling with that. But on a residential structure, the city requires 1.25 parking stalls per residential unit. From our perspective, that would work in some instances. In this instance, in the quality of the condominiums we want to construct, that's not enough parking. And so we've said, let's bounce that up from 1.25 to 2 parking stalls. Because anybody who owns $1 million condominium is going to own 2 cars. That's my guess. Some of the 1-bedroom units, if there are any, and I believe there are some. There we go. I've got pictures. Councilmember Burrell, that's actually the way the site plan looks today. That's on that. There's some differences, as you noticed. One of the things we did is increase the efficiency of the parking in that yellow area and that cul-de-sac. That's basically surface parking for the office use alone. That's exclusive to the office. The map that was originally shown tonight shows 13 parking stalls, but because of the way we structured the stalls at an angle, there's 17 parking stalls. And where real estate up there is at such a high value, we put every parking stall that was reasonable within that space. And so you'll see the same thing. I think we got 2 or 3 more parking stalls for the hotel surface parking. and stayed in the same configuration that you noted. The office building's up on the top right, and it says Unit 2B, that's a condominium structure. The office building actually owns the third level of parking, subject to the shared parking plan. Let's go to that next slide, Mike. I can. And that is the third level of parking. It's colored yellow, and the shared parking plan, which I don't want to go through the whole thing because I think you're all familiar with it, but it's bifurcated the days of the week and the times. And so that the office building gets to use 287 stalls during the week. The only stalls they have that are exclusive to them 24/7, 365 days of the year is that third level of parking and the surface parking stalls that we talked about a little bit earlier. Let's go to that next slide. So this is the second level of the parking. During the week, we get to use those parking stalls that are yellow, and the hotel gets to use the parking stalls. Now, they actually own the second level of the parking structure. It's part of the condominium plat. Next slide, please, Mike.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused.
Okay, go ahead.
When you said they, I thought you were referring to the hotel, but then you said the condos. So the
Yep.
second floor of the parking garage is owned by
hotel.
the hotel,
Correct.
but they only use a portion of it. Is that what you just said?
Correct. So in the shared parking plan, generally speaking, what we found is that most parking stalls are left vacant most of the time. And so we figured out a way with the help of the city and a whole bunch of other people. This is beyond my pay grade, so somebody smarter than me actually designed this plan to utilize the stalls more efficiently. So on the weekends, right, those yellow stalls right there are actually used by the public. So someday they're going to toll the canyon, someday there's going to be more people, someday we're going to have a need for parking. So on the high profile canyon days, the parking in that parking structure is available for them to use. So next slide. This is Shane's masterpiece here. You see where it says Canyon recreationalist parking only? That's the pink one. That was 80 parking stalls. It's 24/7 for the public, period. If you're a canyon recreationalist, you get to park there. If you're not, you don't get to park there under any circumstances. The yellow parking stalls are office parking stalls, except for on weekends, holidays. Then all that yellow turns to red and it's open to the public to use. I don't know if that helps. Here's the original office plan. Now, there were two office plans that were brought to the table. The first one I brought, which was a conditional use permit, and that was approved, I think, as Mike said, like 2014. And there was another conditional use plan that was approved, and that's this one that was done by the purchaser who was going to buy the podium and then build this building. And he amended that approval and got this approved. So that's the first floor. You can see on the bottom part of the screen of that first one, the cul-de-sac. There's a portico to allow people off and then go down and park in the parking structure. The second level is just basically above it. Center corridors, bathrooms, elevators. The cool part about this building is that you can, when it's snowy and nasty outside, you can park in the parking structure and never have to get outside in the snow. Take the elevator to the top floor. It's pretty cool. Next slide. This is the third level. Fourth level on this office building is partial, and we've really emphasized rooftop gardens and still want to do that rooftop garden scenario if it goes to an office building. Now, the office building's approved. Our objective in coming here tonight is trying to make a decision. Is it worth the effort to actually go this other direction? We think this is the easiest route for us for sure. The harder route, which we think is better for the community, is to do the mixed use office residential. Because then we get to go do the amendments to the interlocal agreements and do all the public hearings, and that's a lot of work versus just have this particular building plans completed and then construct it. Now, what's happening recently for us that makes it a little more likely we can get financing. We sold a big piece of real estate that we own up in Farmington, and we're going to 1031 our funds into this property, which is kind of cool. Now it does two things: cuts that interest clock off, and difficult, and it gives us some additional financial flexibility to find funding. I had a call from a realtor today that we've had a tenant that wants to take 3 floors of this building, and he said, "Is it still there?" And I said, "Well, kinda. I'm gonna go see the city council and convert it to residential tonight." But we thought we would leave this choice more in your hands than our hands, because I don't want to fight about it. I don't want to go and have this gigantic struggle and be at odds. I want to go together and say, this is the best use for this property one way or the other, whether it's office or office residential. But that's how the building will look, whether it's residential or strictly office. Same design, same plan. I'll have some minor modifications, but not enough to warrant any kind of a significant change in the building. Next slide. This one's interesting. But this shows the floor to floor ceiling heights at 15 feet. We got about 2.25 stories showing at the corner of Canyon Center Parkway and Wasatch Boulevard. And you'll notice in the slide comparable to this one, that's a residential one on the next series, but the building's a little lower. There's some benefits for the community we thought was pretty cool. So this has the same floor plan. Next slide for the first and second building. On the third and fourth level, we have these cool condominiums. This is a concept. We have asked, and that's the rooftop garden. Thanks, Mike. You're zooming right through because I can tell you want me to hurry. I talk too much, and everybody tells me that. And then they tell me, you don't talk loud enough. Okay, fine. So that's the rooftop gardens, which we think would be a great place for a wedding or a wedding reception. And it's similar to what was done with the other application, where it says roof area. We want to get rid of the rooftop garden in that area. We don't think it serves a purpose, and the cost is prohibitive. It's about $1.2 million to put that in. We said, well, things are changing. Cost on this building's gone up almost $3 million in the last 6 months. Brutal. I mean, it's difficult. How do you deal with those kind of numbers? Let's go to the next slide. So this is how it looks, and you can see on the first and second floor the difference in height versus the other 2 floors. Next slide. Fine. Building renderings. This is the rendering that you saw before. One more slide. It's pretty easy to see how much lower it is. I think that's good for the community. The second parts that are good for the community. Let's go. I think there's one more slide after this, Mike. Yep. The things that are good for the community, for me, it's a lot less work, a lot less money. Just build a building and move on, right? Probably make it into a condominium structure, which I think is a more marketable item, and we'll sell 3 or 4 office condos. For the residential, it does a couple of things. First, I just finished and submitted to Matt, and we had lots of meetings with Matt and the staff on a traffic impact study. What's the difference between an office versus an office residential? It has an absolute minimum reduction in traffic within the community of 2,000 vehicles per month if you go residential versus office. We think that's a big deal. The second big deal is because we don't use all of our parking. I got 287 stalls. I got 2 floors of residential. I'm only going to use, if I got 25 units, and it looks like I might get 21 if I'm lucky, right? If we get 25 units, I'm only going to use 50 parking stalls. All 50 parking stalls fit within that third level of parking. So I don't have to mess up the public parking ratio. It stays with the parking that we have exclusivity over its use and regulation. In fact, I'm going to create 6 more parking stalls in that because I think I can put stalls with you guys' permission. I can put 6 stalls along the one east side of the third parking structure because there's no stalls there. It's just a great big road, and I think we can do that. And when stalls are replacement value at $37,000, I think we ought to do that because it's paint for $200. I think it works out to be a pretty good ROI. But because of that, then we've got 40,000 square feet of office space to lease up on the first 2 floors. And at a parking ratio of 4.5 stalls per 1,000 square feet, I need 180 parking stalls. Now I've got an extra 50 parking stalls that I am not going to use. So one of the things, Jim Rock from the Canyon Racket Club Owners Association called me about 2 years ago and says, hey, can we use some of your parking stalls? And I said, as an office building, I need every single parking stall I got because I'm at 4 per 1,000. I need 5 per 1,000 and I'm limited to 4.5 per 1,000. And then we came up with this idea. So I think we can lease some of those extra stalls. I'd like to keep some of them as a contingency because I really don't know what's going to happen. And I don't want to underpark the project. But we can lease some of those stalls. And I've talked to the David Weekly Homeowners Association president, a really nice lady, and one other lady there. And they're also in favor of this kind of a concept. In fact, the David Weekly Homes people said, let's do them all residential. And I said, nah, I don't think so. The last 2 things I've got for you, and I'll give you guys a copy, is Jason Birmingham. Actually, it wasn't Jason, it's one of the people that work for him. Did an update. I'm going to bring it out if I can. They did an update on the value of the project as it is in reality versus what was projected. In 2018, it was projected to have a total at build out at 51 million. 2020 using actual numbers for everything but the office building. And the office building was quite frankly easy to project because I gave them the numbers from a bid from Big D. Now my challenge is it's gone up $3 million since we did this update. And so we got 51 million of projected incremental value, which is what we figured or based the tax increment funding on. And with the office residential mix, it'll be $58,760,990. So it's gone up largely for a couple of reasons. The hotel's on steroids. They spent more money than they thought they would, which is really cool because I met people there today in the hotel. It's lovely. And Radu spent a lot more money on the restaurant. And the third part was that the apartment complex has gone from 112 units that I proposed to 140 with the owner who owns that property now. So take those calculations, we don't lose any money. We're actually making more money than we anticipated with the change of residential on the 2 floors. Traffic impact study says this. We sent this to, I think you got it, yes, Matt left. He got that board, he decided to leave, right? Said the previous 2014 study assumed the building would be all office. The proposed change would result in 101 fewer weekday trips, that's daily, 29 fewer morning peak hour trips, and 10 fewer evening peak hour trips. So I guess the choice is yours. We just need to know what you guys want us to do. Questions for me?
Yeah, Chris, I did have a question for you. So
Okay.
would this building create its own HOA or would it fall under the existing HOA?
It does both. So the owners association for lot number 2 is a condominium group, right? And there's 5 units within that condominium group, the office, the hotel, the 2 retail units, and 8 Settlers Restaurant. And there's a weighted voting ratio on that, and they actually manage and take care of the parking structure, even though it's owned by the hotel and the office building. It has a parking easement agreement and pretty specific documentation on what needs to happen with the parking. I think the way we've structured this, I don't have to change anything associated with that organization's controlling documentation because we're just using parking exclusively that's still exclusively. Then we'll create another owners association for the building itself for the unit owners. Now our idea is to not only make residential for sale condominiums, but we'll make office for sale condominiums. And then, and the idea is this, if you have tenants, they're really nice people, but they're not residents of Cottonwood Heights. If you own your office, most likely you're staying in Cottonwood Heights. And you start to create a better community instead of just another rental pool of office space. Because after 5 years, I start getting hit up by our tenants in other buildings. We need this concession or that concession, and we're going to have to move somewhere else, that kind of stuff. They own it, they're going to stay. And that's what we've found from experience. That answer your question?
Yeah, and it segues into my next one, which is we in our earlier discussions, we talked about possibly putting into an HOA agreement or advanced development agreement, non-owner occupied restrictions.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to pursue that further so that, like you said, the investment of owning and living here is different.
Um,
So, yeah.
I love the idea. I've talked about it with my partners and they think having 10, we really think it's going to be 19 units that we get, but we'd restrict it to having only 10 units be able to be leased and none of them on a short-term basis, period. So,
And if we move forward with adjustment to the development agreement, that can be a requirement as well, per the development agreement.
I love Shane. I want to meet with him more. That's it.
Council, any other questions for Chris?
Can I sum it up?
I was just gonna
So,
say it. Sorry.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, that's a lot of extra negotiations with going through each of the taxing and renegotiating those things. Since we originally did this, some of them put in more restrictions on what they're willing to do. That would be an interesting thing to pursue. I personally, I like the idea of the mix if that makes it better, but I wouldn't look forward to having those negotiations with all the taxing entities.
I agree with you there, Scott.
Go ahead, Tim. Oh,
you go
Councilmember
ahead.
Burrell.
Yes, one of the concerns that my constituents have shared with me is the same concern that you've mentioned tonight, Mr. McCandless, and that is how elongated this development project is. Jim Rock has said to me on behalf of his HOA there at the Canyon Racket Club condos that they want to see this completed. They don't want to look out on all this unfinished area. And so I'm wondering if CW management would be willing to commit to some kind of timeline to complete the building.
It's difficult to do that when we have no control over the finances. And so I would say, yes, if I could finance it myself, but I don't have that capacity. So if I'm going to tell you that I can, I would be lying to you, and I don't want to do that. It's a $30 million structure. The money that we're putting into it's about 6, in addition to what we've already got there, which is quite a bit. And so I still have to go out and find funding. Now, if somebody came up to me tomorrow and said, here's a check for this much money, we'll buy your podium from you and they can build it, I would walk away and let them do that. Because this has been a long project. Nobody wants to see it done more than I do. I work on it every week, almost every other day. I've shown it. I couldn't tell you how many times I've been up there. I was up there twice today with people on this particular project. We've never walked away from a project. We never will. We've never abandoned any commitment we've ever made to a municipality, and we've never defaulted on any of our agreements ever since 1977. I don't expect to make this the first one. So I can't make a commitment of that magnitude because I can't do it. Wished I could. If I could, I'd be building it right now. I had a tenant for 3 floors and couldn't get financing. It tells you where the marketplace is at.
Thank you.
Does that help? I'd like to give you the answer you wanted to hear, but I cannot.
Tim, yeah, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, so
Let's
just
give us
to
some-
sum up, the positive aspects that Chris has identified is there's parking opportunities, additional parking opportunities for adjacent residential areas, height reductions, and then less projected traffic based on this proposal versus the project value. And the project value is greater than what was originally projected. If you went with general office, it would be even greater, but it's versus that project value. And then also the process can be challenging going through the taxing entity negotiations. So there's definitely pros, community pros, definitely other challenges as far as the increment that would be available and also the process, but it's something that can be pursued if that's what the CDRA board wants to do.
This is this is not really directly related, but the last that I am aware of, the developments with the apartment complex that you mentioned is now going to be 140 units. Has that been determined whether those are going to be attainable or affordable housing, or do you happen to know that?
I talk to the property owner probably every other week. Mark, when you're getting started on this, you're making me crazy. And I like Mark a lot. I don't know the answers to that. I would suggest just send Mark. He's easy to communicate with. He'll answer every phone call you ever make to him, and he can give you a better answer on that. I would think that given the nature of the cost of things today, you're not going to meet an affordability perspective. He is going to be, my guess, north of $200,000 a unit to construct it, probably $250 plus the cost of the dirt. That's just a guess. I don't know that. And you can't do that on a 900 square foot apartment and try to make it meet 80% of the AMI, adjusted medium income. Yeah, I don't see that as a possibility, but I've been surprised in my life before. So, but that's a good question for Mark, and bug him to get started tomorrow because I'm getting tired of waiting.
Hey, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
and-
folks.
and-
Let me know what you decide. Do you need me to stay? I can stay for longer
We-
periods of time.
We would like just council direction on whether you'd want to stay status quo or begin a process to move forward with
Yeah,
the change.
it's been my recommendation from talking to residents from the three things that Tim mentioned: less traffic, less height. The other one can't remember, but anyway, I'm positive parking. Yeah, so I'm ready to say move forward. Councilmember Burrell, Councilmember Renewal.
This isn't the place for this, but for the city, the tax implications.
So on the tax income implications, the original projections that were put together as part of the development agreement on how much we would earn was a set amount. I don't have the amount. What Chris is saying, that this proposal based on new projections would be higher than that original amount.
That's kind of what I gathered.
But the implications are if you stuck with the commercial or the office project, it's probably be even higher than what this new proposal would be.
That's correct.
We
Probably
could
by
get
about
those
2 million.
numbers for you if you wanted.
Yeah, the numbers that
That
I've
would be
got,
where my concern would be.
I'll give this information to Michael and he can get it distributed. And that's got some of that on there and I highlighted it. Councilman, it's 51 was the rounding using the Enron method, right? 51 million was the original 2018 number, and then in 2020 we had this updated. And using the actual numbers from the structures that have been built and projections on those that have not, it'll come in at about 58,760. However, if it was all office, because the residential has that reduction that they're going to get, takes it down to 63. It takes it up to 63.2 if it was all office. So you're losing, so to speak,
5
about
million
5
roughly,
million.
5
difference.
million in value.
Good question.
That's 5 million in taxable value, correct?
Correct, correct. I think you'll have about the same in taxable value, Councilman. The difference is you've got that 45% exemption on residential owner occupied properties. If they were rented, then it might be different, but I don't know that because I don't qualify for that.
Well, the only concerns that I'll probably hear about is this concern over condominiums that do not require owner occupancy, renting out to during the ski season less than 30 days, even though our city, doesn't allow it. I've had residents tell me, well, I don't want to have to play the enforcer on this because unless someone in the public complains, then they have to indicate, well, what evidence do you have or whatever, that these are not being, that these are being rented for less than 30 days at a time. And this is a real key issue, also related to ADUs. And I mean, residents in District 4, between the traffic problems, which we know the cars can be backed up for a mile, so between the traffic and then the short-term rentals, that concern is very great on their minds.
Sure. And we've had lots of conversations with them about that as well. The zoning that is in place today does not allow short-term rentals in that community.
But the problem is that
They'll still do it.
they
Yeah.
do it. And
We all know that. And there's not much, if somebody wants to break the law, I can't promise you that either, that I can go in and enforce it on. I don't have police
I
authority.
mean, I'm just bringing that up because
Sure.
that's going to be something I'm probably going to get asked.
Yep.
Although if there's fewer cars, related to, when you mentioned 2,000 fewer vehicles, did you mean 2,000 fewer vehicle trips per month? Is that what you meant when you gave that
Correct.
statistic?
Did I say vehicles?
You said vehicles, but I figured you meant vehicle trips. But then later you said 101. Oh, that's 101 fewer trips, day trips. So,
Correct.
got it.
I think
Okay.
the total is 140, but the reason I'm quoting, that's per day. So it's more than the 2,000. But the study's above my pay grade, quite frankly. So I went down because if I'm not reading it the way I think it's written, I don't want to be telling you 2,800 when it's 2,000. And I know it's at least 2,000 trips fewer per month in the community. And I think that's a big deal. And all the levels of service associated with the access roads to and from are A through C through 2050.
Well, local residents have reported to me that they've been very disappointed that the Canyon Center did not come through with any kind of meaningful transit woven into the project. That makes everybody that comes in and out of there driving a private vehicle. I just feel like I have to go on record that is been a grave disappointment, and I don't know, what can possibly mitigate that kind of thing at this point in the development, but we would appreciate your a little keener eye to reducing vehicle miles traveled through Cottonwood Heights. It's very, very important to our residents.
Sure. So one of the things that we recognized that right off the bat, we initially started charging for parking. We have those cool little gates up. Since we opened it, we have not charged for parking. It's just open to people to use. I can lead a horse to water, Councilwoman, but I cannot make them drink. It is amazing to me that people will park farther away and spend time hiking from west of 70th south to get to the bus station instead of just park there in a parking structure for no expense and walk across the intersection. Interesting.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks.
It's been very informative, and I think as far as the direction, I think we'll talk. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the June 30th CDRA report that from Mike Johnson.
Thank you. I'm going to go quickly through these next two items here. The next item is the annual project area report that every city in Utah with CRA or RDA or CDA or project area like this is required to submit per state statute. These are required annually. This is the one exception in the last while because the legislature changed the reporting requirements this last session. These were always known as the November 1st reports, and they'd be approved annually every November. So we did that just not that long ago. That got switched now, and they're now required to be submitted by June 30th. You have a copy of the report. They just provide a summary of active project areas in the city, and then details on the expenses and revenues generated and any changes within those areas within the last year. These are submitted now to the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, who will create a database for projects statewide and manage that. So this is where that goes. The notable updates since the previous report in November, the apartment building entitlement was modified from 117 units to 140. And then 2 small retail spaces that Chris talked about are substantially complete now. Maybe the biggest update is that we've received the first large increment collection since triggering this area and have distributed kind of the first round of funding out to each of the taxing entities. That distribution is shown here. It's in the report, so you can read through it. But the distribution's in this lower section here of what we've collected, which was just over $500,000. And then how that breaks out into what each taxing entity received. So that's probably the most notable update since the November 1st report is we've received those funds and distributed those. Other than that, it's just the standard report required annually. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Seeing none, thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. We do need to adopt this report, this as an official report submitted to the state. So I will entertain a motion to approve the June 30th CDRA report.
I move to approve the June 30th CDRA report.
I second that.
Motion to approve from Councilmember Newell, a second from Councilmember Burrell. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Councilmember Bracken. Okay, the next item on our agenda is 4.0, an update on the proposed gravel pit and town center / Hillside community reinvestment.
Thank you. This is just a quick update. These project areas were adopted by survey resolution by the CDRA a couple of years ago. We got slowed down quite a bit by COVID, and especially with Salt Lake County, who repurposed a lot of staff and their priorities shifted. But we just wanted to bring this back to you and let the agency know we are back at it. We have begun discussions. We've held meetings previously on each of these with Canyon School District and with the recreation service area. And then we've given direction to our consultant on this, Lewis Young, Robertson and Birmingham, to submit formal application to Salt Lake County to begin that negotiation process. And as a reminder, that is for 2 proposed community reinvestment areas, CRAs, one at the gravel pit, which includes the large gravel pit property, but it also includes the property on the west side of Wasatch Boulevard, the old mill land there. The other project area is the Cottonwood Heights Town Center CRA, which includes most notably Hillside Plaza, but also 63 other acres of land around that to try to guide and spark some reinvestment in that area and create a cohesive town center, downtown type area there. So those are underway. Like I said, we've given direction to our consultant to provide notification to the county, and we'll begin pursuing those meetings with all these taxing entities and moving these forward.
May I just comment?
Yes.
So we're moving these forward, and then based on what I'm hearing tonight regarding the Canyon Center, it would have to come back to you for final consideration, all the taxing entities. But we would probably bring this along as well to the taxing entities. And I'm hearing that there's not opposition to moving that forward. Am I correct? Recognizing that you're going to have to make a final decision later on.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Any questions? More questions, comments from the council? Okay. With that, we the last item before we adjourn is approval of minutes, and I will entertain a motion to approve, and these minutes are actually not from a previous meeting, they're from these, or I'll let Shane actually.
I think actually we just described there the process for approving these minutes, which haven't been prepared yet. So I think the process, Paula can correct me if I'm wrong, is that she'll circulate the minutes, and if there are no changes, or if there are changes, she will circulate them again until everybody basically concurs by not objecting to them. And then they'll be deemed approved.
So do we need to do a motion, Shane? We don't need to do a motion. Great. Okay, at this point, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn and reconvene at 6:30 for our business meeting.
I motion to adjourn until the business meeting at 6:30.
Second,
All in favor?
And
say
that is
aye.
in 20 minutes.
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope.
You got 20 minutes, Scott.
All right, I just want to make sure I